Hello, everybody, and welcome back to that Milan podcast. Martino Puccio, Matt Santangelo, alongside you guys. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment on today's podcast and YouTube channel. Obviously, we are on Apple and Spotify for audio podcasts as well. We have surpassed over 10,000 listens audio-wise, so we would like to thank you all so much for yet another milestone, despite these very difficult times. Nice golf clap there. Repping, I think this was the Scudetto winning season Tonali kit today for myself because it was so much fun to watch him play over international
I
break.
think that was the year before Scudetto.
Was it? I honestly don't even remember.
That was
They're
his
all
first
blurs.
year jersey, I think.
It was all blurs, to be honest
Yeah.
with you. It's after COVID, but either way, we are here to talk some Milan. So again, subscribe and follow everything over here. So this weekend, the club finally returns after the international break, and they face off against Venezia, newly promoted, really weak team. But as we know with Milan, they have a lot of issues defensively, midfield-wise, almost in every area, and drama following the club. So, Matt, to kind of start off with this, there is nothing left to say but 3 points and nothing else. If it's anything less than 3 points, then the situation is always going to get worse. And it can get worse, considering the fixtures that are coming up. And we'll get into one other one. This preview versus Venezia, man. We'll see what happens with Pulisic. There's some rumors that he might not be starting in this one because they just played last night against New Zealand. For me, you have to put your best team forward, kill the game off early as you can. Hopefully there is some balance within the side to kind of stave off whatever Venezia can throw at Milan. But call a spade, Matt. This is a must-win game for Milan on match day 4.
Yeah, and that shows you how dire the situation is. And, look, even before this match, everyone was, saying top 4 is in doubt. Now, I think that was a little of an exaggeration, but
Sure.
This fan base, the struggles of recent years still linger, right? There's still those scars and wounds that exist, and they're just tired of lackluster results. They're tired of limping into the key games. Again, of course, we have Inter coming up and Liverpool as well, so it's not getting easier. It's not like Milan's in a position where they're saying you got to get over this team and then it gets easier. The door opens and there's light at the end of the tunnel. Milan are playing bad football. They're up against teams that are very good, not Venezia. I'm not, slighting them, but they got tough games coming up around the bend, and every game feels like a tough game at this point when they're playing the way they are, when they're struggling to find their footing, when Fonseca's struggling to play a consistent 11, which I know has been a huge talking point. There's a new left back, there's new wingers, there's new midfielders, so on and so forth. So, it's a dire situation without question. You mentioned it, Venezia, an underwhelming team. I think maybe you can make the case of the newly promoted sides. They're a team that many consider to probably be right in the thick of things to get an immediate drop. But, make no mistake about it. Like I said, with Parma, they're going to get up for this game. This is Milan. Milan's a wounded bird right now. Venezia needs some momentum. They haven't had a great start to their return to Serie A. Yeah. What better team to come up against than Milan, who have conceded 2 goals in their first 3 matches, look very disheveled, look very dysfunctional defensively. They're one of the worst teams defensively in the league right now. And even for a team like Venezia that doesn't really ooze class and scoring threats up front, leave it to Milan to really open the door for Venezia. So I think, you're absolutely right. It has to be 3 points. And truthfully, I'm at the point now where I don't care how you slice it and how it happens. It could be the 3 points you can get.
Yeah, I would even take like a annoying 2-1 result win.
Give me a ghost goal. Give me a
like Venezia. Venezia is so bad, right? We'd recognize this. Already eliminated from Coppa Italia, Brescia beat them 3-1. Lazio dismantled them in the opening Serie A match day week 3-1. Clean sheet draw versus Fiorentina. Already more clean sheets than Milan. 1-0 loss to Torino, and who Milan played and were dominated by, and Venezia only lose to that lowly scoreline there. Even then, you kind of see a little bit of competitiveness from them in the past 2 games, results-wise. For Milan, I mean, listen, the offensive talent's just there. You have to maintain possession midfield-wise and keep the pressure on Venezia, where Milan are creating and scoring so many chances that Venezia can't even breathe to hit them on the counterattack. And again, we know transitionally how poor Milan have been. It's one of the worst defensive starts in club history. And that kind of leads us to what you were just saying about who fits and who's starting and what has Fonseca been able to figure out. And it's really coming down to this: who is actually going to start this weekend within this formation? For me, I'll be honest with you. I'm shocked that I'm saying this, and I've had this thought. I haven't even told you yet about it. Start Davide Calabria at the right back for this game. I actually don't want to see Emerson Royale after what I just saw. Calabria, physically a disaster, positionally poor, but I will never see what Emerson Royale did in that Lazio game from Davide Calabria, I would think. Obviously, poor performances from the two, but just really like it. Emerson Royale looked like a headless chicken in that one, and it was really frustrating to watch. I think he should get benched for that performance. Calabria also terrible. Whatever. He's had 2 weeks of rest. It's against Venezia. And there's this match against Liverpool midweek, so it's going to be interesting to see how Fonseca juggles this. And then the derby shortly after. It's really difficult. It seems like Loftus-Cheek will be at the 10 again. Couldn't disagree more for like the umpteenth time, second straight manager. I don't know how many times I have to say this. I've reiterated this on every single podcast, and people like to seem and think that I condone this starting. I never once have, still don't, never will. So it should be a 4-3-3 if we do anything formation-wise, if there's a change. So we're operating under the assumption that this is a 4-2-3-1. Naturally, you're going to have Tomori, Pavlovic, Teo, I would assume, gets back into the starting role. Pretty shaky international break from him, especially against Italy. And then the reported double pivot of Reijnders and Fofana. Your two best options, given the circumstances, are they a match? Are they good together with their skill sets? No. This just doesn't work. This isn't the proper balance for a double pivot with their skill sets. Like, we see Reijnders balling out with the Netherlands, Matt, linking up with Xerxes. So much better in a more advanced role. Clearly the better number 10 over Loftus-Cheek, but here we are. And then it should be Leao, Loftus-Cheek, might be Chukwueze considering Pulisic's situation. And I believe Morata is supposed to be back for this one. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. Could see him starting. If not, I think it's Tammy Abraham if Morata wants to get eased in. Tammy looked great in his small cameo against Lazio. So I'd be happy with either of those two strikers. Yeah, man. I mean, if we're assuming 4-2-3-1, is that something you agree with? Or what? I mean, obviously we both don't agree with the number 10, but where's your head at? We almost feel like there's no way Fonseca's abandoning the 4-2-3-1 barring some surprise.
No, and look, that's the formation he trotted out through much of the summer and preseason friendlies. Obviously, we've talked about that at length, that it wasn't the personnel. There was a lot of moving parts, a lot of players that were on the fringe, and youngsters that really we didn't envision having large roles in the team this year. So it's tough to kind of copy and paste formations and be like, hey, this is how it worked, so this is how we're going to keep going forward. But when you look at the squad makeup, you look at the profiles we have in certain departments, it feels like that at some point during the season, with results being so Jekyll and Hyde, it seems as though that Fonseca is probably going to be in a position where he has to go to a 4-3-3. But we just mentioned, right, he's been so non-committal, to a consistent 11. Now, that can boil down to a couple different things. That can boil down to the fact that, Fofana came in late. Certain players were banged up coming in. They weren't quite ready to start from the onset, like Morata and stuff. So context does matter. But I think it really doesn't, exude a lot of confidence when you have 3 match days in. You've conceded 2 goals in each of those games. You're struggling to get results. And now it's every week. You don't really know what the preferred 11 is. Players don't really know or have an idea, at least visually from us, right? Where we're going off of what their role is and what type of formation is going to go out there. So I think that's a big
Mhm.
concern. So I think that, maybe it is a conversation of saying, hey, look, we have to get something on paper and something definitive and define somewhat of an identity when it comes to shape and when it comes to
Yes.
personnel. So I
Yeah.
think that in Fonseca's defense, 4-2-3-1 is pretty expected. It's just kind of the way that it's being assembled and trotted out there. I think you're spot on with Ruben Loftus-Cheek, but I think the truth of the matter is this: coaches are going to have their preferred players, the
Yep.
players that make X amount of money. You're not going to put on the bench and, cause issues. I think that it's one of those things where Fonseca now is in a position where he's trying to accommodate everybody. And the truth of the matter is this: there's some things have to give. Certain players are not going to fit a formation. And we
Yeah.
already know that with Ruben Loftus-Cheek as a 10. He's got other qualities that fit in certain areas, more as a box-to-box player. Look at that PSG game in the Champions League last year. He was very good.
It
But
started the last season when he was in a 4-3-3
of course,
formation. I know Pulisic started off great, but you could
yeah,
even argue at the time Loftus-Cheek was right there with him. I thought he started off last year better than Reijnders did and a couple
yeah.
other signings. And it was just like a bull in a china shop with the way he was running and dominating the midfield. Again, I always like to reference that Roma match at the Olimpico. He was fantastic until Tomori's red card, where they had to change formations.
That
He got
changes the
subbed
whole
off.
complexion of the game.
And then
Yeah.
Pioli, uh, the nicest way I could put it is he pissed down his legs during the derby and then completely abandoned the formation that
Yeah.
had them off to a great start. And we'll get into the news later about one of our heralded midfielders and his situation and how that impacts the 4-2-3-1. But I also have a question for you with this. We see this over the weekend. We see it with the international break. TG Reijnders is an awesome midfielder. I think he's all around our best midfielder, and yet he's not getting a look in this position. Two questions for you. One, why? Two, is it because of Fonseca being married to this 4-2-3-1 that he feels like he has no choice but to put Reijnders in the double pivot because any other option that isn't Reijnders is far worse in that double pivot than he is? Because that just feels like where we are at this point. Because I think a lot of people know out of all the midfielders that isn't named Liberali, that's a 17-year-old kid, Reinders fits the skill set best for that central attacking midfield role. But also at the same time, Loftus-Cheek is better at the 10 than Reinders or Loftus-Cheek would be as the double pivot. Like, that's the reality of it. I don't think Loftus-Cheek is better in either, but unfortunately, I'd rather see Loftus-Cheek as the 10 instead of the 8, the 6, where he's in a double pivot. Like, that's, to me, it's silly. But I will say this: he's willing to try out Salamakers at left back, even though we don't agree. We see him bench Leao and Teo. Why so difficult to bench someone like Loftus-Cheek and try this instead? And I know we talk about continuity and having that consistency in 11, but if you're willing to make rash changes, then why isn't this one of them? Why not give that a look, even if it's for a 20-minute stretch in the game?
Well, just to kind of go back to the original question of Reinders, I think the profile is there for him to play as a number 10 in this team. I think that, he's a player that is an efficient passer. He moves the ball. And we talked about this, in our one of our previous episodes. There's a difference between completing a pass and executing a pass and then doing so in an advantageous position for the receiver of that pass to do something with it. And that's what we saw in the first match against Torino with Yunus Musa. The pace he moves the ball, the crispness for which he plays the ball to certain players,
Mm-hmm.
those things I think do translate as a number 10 because we do so well, in my opinion, in the final third as far as moving the ball, keeping teams pinned back. But it's sometimes looking for that incisive pass or, keeping things moving and
Yeah,
moving with so urgency. Sometimes we fall victim of, hey, we're in the final third. Let's keep teams pinned back. Fonseca stressed that a
sure.
lot,
Yeah.
and okay, fine, but we're just kind of moving the ball back. And it's like teams that are going to sit deep, like Torino's, even Venezia, they would love nothing more than a scoreless draw here to get points.
Yeah.
They're happy to say, well, take the ball. Like you can move the ball back and
Yeah.
forth, 70% possession. So I think that there's a lot of things that Tijani would bring as a number 10, but I think it really does go back to finding continuity. And I think that that is such a big focus right now and such a huge issue for Fonseca and Milan, and largely to blame for the lack of consistent play and results so far. So I could kind of understand why he didn't there, but getting to the Ruben Loftus-Cheek situation, I think you're right. Like we've seen him in a double pivot enough to know that he's not that type of profile. But I do think that while you maybe like certain things with Tijani forward up the pitch,
Yeah.
you have to ask it begs the question, do you have anybody in this team or in this midfield currently that can play that role of a progressor of play from that more deeper position? Because we know that Fofana maybe isn't this out and out, rugged, true defensive stopper, but he does have really good defensive metrics and he does show well as a pretty good passer and ball player. So I think when you look at Tijani, you need someone that can take the ball out the back because these teams are going to press Milan. So you need someone that can be a receiver of that pass and do something with it and carry, which Tijani does really well. The work rate's always there. He often covers the most amount of ground in most matches for Milan. He plays the most minutes as any outfield player did last year for Milan. So I think that you want him touching the ball as much as possible. And I think he does that so in the double pivot.
Yeah, and that's kind of the frustrating part here, because if you know that like you're taking one piece out of a puzzle and you're putting it in another spot, and
it
your
just
spot
completely just
consistently is just like
balances.
opening. It's almost like playing a groundhog game where you're trying to like smash the mole and then the mole just keeps popping up in a different court. Like,
Or
you're not
there's like a
paying
leak.
attention.
There's a leak and you cover one and then it just comes out
Starts
the other
leaking
end.
out of the other.
Yeah.
There's just no consistent, like, here, I'm blocking both. It's just one little piece. And it's sort of like, okay, if you know that's consistently going to be the problem and you don't have a solution for it, then why not just change formations? Why are we married to this 4-2-3-1? I do not know. I genuinely do not know. They have the personnel for the 4-3-3. They have everybody that they would need in it. And even then, the way the box-to-box midfielders would work in this formation, there would be more covering for players. Like, to have a left-sided midfielder be in between where like Teo and Leao are is going to do everything with defensive makeup and making up for those mistakes and allowing them to play forward because they're such phenomenal players on their day. To me, it's sort of like, okay, if you're not trusting this formation and these players, when do these players pop up into the situation and scenario of this? You have Voss, who profiles, and we'll get our friend on, Raphael, soon. There's just been some scheduling conflicts. But with Voss, you hear immediately from this Milan Futuro debut, too good for this level. Shouldn't be there. Should be with the first team. Obviously, we know he's debuted for Ajax already. What was it? It was around a €5 million purchase, 5 to 7 million.
Given the total
circumstances,
bonuses,
yeah. And so with that, it's sort of like, what do we have to lose here when the start is so rugged? I think we're not asking for a 90-minute start. I'm not asking for a 90-minute start. What I'm asking for is, okay, we're in a pretty decent position here in the game. We're up 2-0 on Venezia, for example. It's the 70th minute or so. Voss is called up. Why not see what he could do for 20 minutes? If he could handle and show a strong defensive performance for 20 minutes, that just builds up overall confidence in a player that you know is capable of playing in a position. You know he's not completely overwhelmed and out of place, making a debut in a tougher match. Just so you know, these matches in Serie A are not cakewalks coming up for Milan. So I'll go through it just one more time with it. And it's Inter, obviously, in the derby. You have Lecce after that. Lecce play great against the top teams in the league. This has been well documented since they've come up. Fiorentina struggling, still no slouches. And then I'll be in attendance for this one against Udinese. At some point, you have to try and get these players in here, because what I also had not mentioned was there is Liverpool and Leverkusen in between those games. Guys are going to be getting tired. There's going to be less rest. There is one more international break coming up with that. But Matt, like, eventually, we're not saying give these players huge roles like a Liberali, Voss, or Zeroli, but give them an audition, a cameo in which we have a better indication of where they're at in terms of their progress to being first-team players. How much better is Kevin Zeroli from that debut against Sassuolo last year? Is he significantly better? Has he made marginal steps forward? Like, where are they in this development? Because that's key for Milan. That's key for what they do in January. It's key for how they juggle and manage matches throughout the rest of the season. And guess what? Their overall future of the club, everything that has to do with the project. Do we have guys in this C team that are capable of being first team players? And we don't know until they feature. I think the features have to happen sooner than later because what are the options? They feel very limited. So, what do you think about these two and their possibility of them debuting? Sounds like Vos is closer because of like his experience is greater than Zeroli, and he's already looked better with Futuro. So, what do you think?
The integration of these younger Milan Futuro players is going to be something that gets monitored the entire season, not by just fans, but obviously by management who have made this a big talking point and have put a lot of emphasis in building out this team for a lot of the reasons we all know, right? It's a pipeline for players to become first teamers. It's a way of generating profit on the sales side of transfers. If you're following the Juve next gen approach, where you have players that are doing some good things, maybe you can't carve out a role for them, but maybe they're going out on loan with obligations, and now you suddenly it's a talent factory that turns into profit factory. Excuse me. So I think that as players in the first team struggle for consistency, I'm looking at Ruben Loftus-Cheek. I'm looking at the injury of Ismail Bennacer, which we will talk about. As I'm looking at, maybe the stunted or stalled growth of Yunus Musa. Then the conversation becomes, are these guys in this C team better than what we currently have? And if they are, how is Paulo Fonseca going to integrate them without shaking the cages and causing issue within the changing room? Because the truth of the matter is this: you have players that are first teamers. Ruben Loftus-Cheek, Chelsea, played in the Premier League, England international. He's making amongst the most at Milan. It sets a dangerous precedent when you're saying after 5-6 games, Ruben Loftus-Cheek, you're not doing it. We're bringing up a kid who's largely unproven to get results. Yeah. So I think that's where the Milan Futuro team is a blessing. But if not handled correctly, it can also be a curse because it can cause a lot of friction, which we don't need amongst players and coaches, especially if the results continue to be this poor. So I agree with you. I think that the players that are playing the best, I don't care about age. I'm talking about Liberali. I'm talking about Zeroli. I'm talking about Vos. If you're showing me consistently that you're making strides forwards and those complacent performances by the first teamers continue to persist, something has to give. You can't keep trotting out the same losing formula and have that sense of entitlement by those first teamers that think that their job is safe. The truth is, you have to put out the players that are going to help you get results. And I think that sooner rather than later, we have to have that conversation of at least integrating some of them. I'm not saying it has to be this huge wave and influx of Liberali starting games and playing 30, 40 minutes and taking minutes away from, first teamers that maybe are just going through a rough patch. But you have to start having that conversation because we're seeing these players get called up consistently for match days, at Milanello training with the first team. And all we hear is the buzz. Oh, this guy's doing really well. He's punching above his weight. Yeah. Okay. Well, when you're putting this much investment in this project and all we hear is Ibrahimovic, Moncada, everyone say how much they're really trying to build this up, show us how much you're going to build it up. Because if you're just going to build this up and it's going to be a simple matter of, well, we're just building out so we can sell players, then I'm not here for it because the fans.
No one's here for that. No one's
here for that. No one's here for that.
Listen, that's just like, I don't give a shit what it does to the dressing room. I'm here for Milan to collect the most points possible. I've said this time and time again. It's been annoying in the comments section to an extent. We love the majority of you. There was just like certain comments from this past episode of us, like, or guys or whoever you are just saying, oh, you guys are finally now calling out management. You guys don't pay attention if that's the case. You never paid attention. As long as we've been doing this version of the podcast, we have called out management on countless occasions.
Yeah.
The difference is we're not calling them out for every little single thing. We're not here to call out ownership for doing a collaboration with the New York Yankees. I'm not here for that shit. You know what I'm here about? Sporting results and sporting decisions. That's what I care most about. And Max from the MLM podcast was making a great point that we were both agreeing on. Like, people are freaking out about this whole Yankees collaboration. We're just like, who gives a shit? Why does that matter? If you guys want to get angry about decisions on who they sign in the double pivot, more power to you. Totally respect it. Are you angry about them taking forever to sign certain players and get them integrated into the team? Valid opinion, valid point. Don't really care. Don't think that's a negative thing. That's plausible. However, you can't just like sit here and complain about every little thing. I think that's when it gets silly, because at a certain point, you still have to be operating as a business. And guess what? Operating as a business means you do collaboration deals. You think they should just stop everything? Is like my question.
Don't blame the head of marketing and branding for
who
doing
do a great job, by the way.
Yeah,
Like,
who are doing a great job.
It's literally nonsense. They're doing their job. It's so silly to me that you think everything should stop because the results are poor. Motherfucker, they were doing Hello Kitty brand deals when they were the worst team possible for Milan standards. And they thought, oh, look at this. This is doing a great job. Nobody said shit then about it. They weren't kidding. They laughed at it because Hello Kitty is a funny brand to have with a football club. But seriously, let's focus on what's important. And the most important thing is that Milan do well on the pitch. They get results. That's what matters. And to what my initial point was going to be was, I don't give a shit what the problem is in the dressing room at that point. If people are complaining about not having as many minutes as they want, but the results are not in their favor, like if they keep having results like this and players are continuing to complain about their minutes, you could leave. You're not doing well and you're complaining. There's no room for you here. We don't want that. That's toxic club culture. And I'm not saying any of these players have done it. This is just on the basis of that point you were making. And I don't think that would be the case. There's just a lot of bad optics, and someone needs to kind of show who the leader is. And I know this kind of circles back to Redburn, and we'll get into like Liverpool soon and this Bennacer news. But the overall point is, like Matt, and we talked about it last episode, who is the true leader of this club? You knew when Maldini here, he was the face. He was everything. He did his job. Masada fell in line. He was great at what he did. Moncada, to an extent, was a good scout when he was leading them in that area. Gazidis was a phenomenal CEO. We have like Moncada, Di Ottavio in the sporting section. We have Furlani's the CEO, and then Zlatan's doing everything, it seems. And it's sort of like, who is Zlatan in this as a figurehead? Is he a face? Is he making key decisions? Is he the reason why certain players sign? Does he have final say on deals? Is he negotiating? Is he the one scouting these guys? There's so much all over the place that the structure feels weird. And then Jerry pops in every now and then. And
for a photo,
unfortunately for Jerry and the way Jerry approaches this, Jerry just doesn't quite simply grasp what it means to be CEO. And again, this is not CEO, owner of a club. He's helped guys like George Steinbrenner, but George Steinbrenner still made his own decisions at the end of the day and knew what the club needed, knew what the team needed. Jerry, I'm not fully convinced on. He's just gotten into this as the venture, as the guy. That's really hard to adjust, regardless of the situation. I'm not here to make excuses for him, but that's why it's an issue, because he doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't know how to handle a lot of these things, and it's reflective in that. It's reflective in his comments that he constantly makes. I didn't realize Milan had this much success. Good Lord, don't say
that. You just don't say that.
Like, I didn't realize that, I didn't realize who better to lead and be the face of AC Milan than Zlatan Ibrahimovic. You fired Paolo Maldini. Things like that show that you don't understand from a sporting sense and a club sense on what it's all about and how they got to that point, right? It's about the product itself. You know, like what the basic business lessons that they tell you all the time is that don't worry so much about making money with your business. Worry about your product first. If your product is good, the money will come in. If you make a great Oreo cookie, the Oreo is fantastic. It'll sell itself because it's so good. Don't worry about how much money you're making with your cookie. It feels like Milan are worried too much about how much money they're making. Fact is this: you invest and you make a great Milan team, you're going to be making a hell of a lot more money than a lot of teams that are not in the Premier League, just because Premier League is like stupid money. I just think there's an overall point that there needs to be this adjustment period with said owner, and said owner doesn't really kind of understand the gravity of the situation, and that's why we're at where we're at, and it's going to take longer than people want. So we'll go to another club now that is very similar in parallels to Milan. English ownership. They own one of your favorite teams. They're interested in buying one of my favorite teams currently in the Boston Celtics, FSG, and Liverpool. Listen, Liverpool are a fantastic team. Not very different, but I would say stylistically, they are clearly different under Arne Slot as opposed to Jurgen Klopp. There isn't this fantastic, phenomenal pressing system. This is one of the best executed of the teams that I have watched so far this season. I've seen pretty much all major, massive teams. I haven't gotten to see too much of PSG this year, but out of all the teams that I've seen in top teams, Liverpool has the best counterattack I've seen so far. Truly, truly impressive. The way they sliced up Manchester United, I think you caught some of that game. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
The Luis Diaz goal, the second I saw that happen, I'm like, holy shit, Milan have no chance.
Like just ruthless, cutthroat counterattacking football.
Like it was perfection. Yeah. You're not going to do that all the time, but we know how much space Milan leave. and the dysfunctional tactics within the squad right now, we'll see that happen. They will get sliced and diced. They will get ruined. They will get destroyed. It's one of the best winger duos on the planet in Salah and Luis Diaz.
And Jota, with respect.
Jota is healthy. I mean, he's playing.
Yeah.
He's a super talent. Vibes are low for me. Yeah. I'm not positive heading into this one. I think this one could be actually a historical embarrassment for Milan in the Champions League. Truthfully, I have a hard time seeing them score. I have a hard time seeing them concede less than 2 goals. What are your vibes heading into this one? I think this is like, and I don't like to do automatic things in this sport. It's an automatic L, in my opinion.
I mean, all signs point to that based on results. I think, the game against Venezia has to show me something. If we look like we're turning a corner, maybe this is the launching off point. Maybe we needed a team like Venezia with respect to them that, okay, like international break is over. We come back, clear heads, go against Venezia, play pretty good football, more or less iron out some of the defensive issues, even if it's not perfect. And then you go into that Liverpool game and look, it's a Champions League night. Both these clubs have great history, in this competition and against one another. So you kind of maybe say like maybe some of that, experience that Milan has in this competition. But then I kind of always go on the argument side of it's not the same players. This isn't like everyone's saying Milan has Champions League DNA. This isn't 2007. Like we don't have the same team as 2007. We don't have the same coach as 2007. So it's not the same thing. Right. But I think getting back to Liverpool, and talking about kind of where they're at and how that kind of translates to what Milan is, there's a stark contrast with how, they went from Klopp, who was there for years, established this whole winning culture, and they went through the process of, earmarking and getting their coach right. And I know it's early days, but to your point, it feels as though the Arne Slot is like the guy. It's like, wow, in a way like the Steelers, Pittsburgh Steelers, if you're following me on this one, where you don't have to have coaches every other year. You have guys that have long, steady stints at the club, and then you pass it over to the next guy, and the culture's there, the identity's there. Everything's calculated, everything's buttoned up, and there's a way they go about it. Whereas with Milan, when it came to the appointment of Fonseca, and I know it's going from Pioli to Fonseca versus Klopp, but it's different. But I think there's a way that Milan are a big club. They have a big history. They have a lot of prestige. But in certain instances of when it comes to transfers and appointments for coaches, it almost seems as that they lack preparation, and they lack levity and understanding of the situation at hand, and knowing that you just had a coach in Pioli who gave you what you wanted for 5
Yeah,
years, as far as
sure.
consistency in the Champions League,
Pioli had a
top
great team
honor,
under Milan. Yeah.
and now you're in a position where you could potentially fumble it if it's not handled correctly. So I think
Yeah.
that that's really what, you can look at in a matchup like this, beyond the tacticos and all the sorts of things we're going to see in the build up to this game, is the framework for success, the framework of playing good football, inspiring, uplifting football that is repeatable and that fans can sort of expect on a weekly basis. But Milan, we don't know what we're getting on a weekly basis. We can get a great performance against a PSG in the Champions League like we did last year, and everyone's like, "Whoa, Milan are a very good team." And then the next week you drop a stinker against all expectation. So in a match like this, I'm almost inclined to stick with the same theme, and that maybe Milan come up against Liverpool, their first true test of the season, and maybe while they don't win, they come up and they give Liverpool a proper showing, and it's something that they can take forward. But I would agree with you. I don't have any confidence right now that they're going to go into this game and it's not going to be a proper, the punch match with Liverpool, knocking them out with a couple goals. I just don't
I don't
see
even know how
anything
they.
but that.
I don't even know how they put in a good performance, to be honest with you. And by the way, the Steelers reference, to give people an example, imagine Palermo, right, and how they do things with managers. Just the opposite. That's what I could do for you there. It's every single thing. Well, Palermo before Citigroup, where was it?
Yeah.
Zaccaroni would fire everybody, or no?
Zamperini.
Zaccarini, sorry. But yeah, I mean, listen, it's going to be scary. Liverpool are a very good team, but it's a great kind of measuring stick for the team. I don't expect a great result. I think any result would be fantastic. If you get a draw against this Liverpool, I think Milan, that's a great result for them.
Of course.
We'll see. We'll see. And again, that's a quick sort of rotation and turnaround. This Saturday, we have Venezia, and then again on the 17th, is Liverpool. So it's a 3-day turnaround for that sort of match and style. And with that turnaround, Milan are going to be without this guy. News coming out after his stint with Algeria in the international break that Bennacer will be out for 3 months. Antonio Vitiello had confirmed this. There were rumors that he would be out. Initially, when first reports came, they're like, he's out for Venezia. You're like, damn, again, this guy can't stay healthy. Now, this isn't like this guy can't stay healthy. This guy's career is in the tube. It's done at the top level. It's unfortunately for someone who doesn't want to go at. I'm not having a go at Bennacer. He's one of my favorite players. I have his kit. Like I've always adored him and adored watching him. But that was years ago because I can't watch this guy on a consistent basis. He doesn't stay healthy. And even when he is healthy, he does not look fit. And even if he is quote unquote fit, as in good enough to be on the field, he has not been good on the field. He has not put in a good shift or match since that game against Napoli in the Champions League in which he got hurt. There's certain things with a player where I do find it unlucky with how they get hurt. Andrea Conti, Caldara, season-ending injuries, surgeries. Florenzi is another one. That's bad luck.
Yeah.
Tearing his ACL for Bennacer, bad luck. However, when you are consistently getting soft tissue injuries and injuries like this, and it's just time and time and time again, where you can't even get a run of like 5 straight matches, where you're putting in, he's not even on the field for 5 straight matches. No. Forget good performances.
Like he's on permanent load management.
And we're talking about him, Origi, Fotoballatore. Now you're starting to stack up wages that are just of players that don't contribute. They're not in this team. So all the hopes of holding out for 35 million for a Saudi team, you're lucky if you get 20 at any point now. I think Milan would be very fortunate to get 20 for him. This is why I preferred his sale in the summer instead of hoping for a Saudi team. It seemed like Milan had set a high bar for a player.
They were holding
You have
out
this
for
number of 50 million, you have to match it. Meanwhile, this is the problem with that. We'd like Milan to sell players for high figures, but we also have to know the player in which you are selling and how much he is valued at and how significant the risk is if you were to keep said player and not sell him. The risk here was, and I pointed this out, and I've said this, and I was right so immediately, and I'm annoyed that I'm right because it's a loss for all involved. This guy has no transfer value now. Even if it is, it's marginally good. He's not healthy. He's not playing on the pitch. Milan have one less double pivot option now because you knew that was probably one of their better options as opposed to a lot of these other guys. You don't have him, and now you have a player who is so talented, so good, respectful, good image for the club. Can't say a negative thing about him as a person. His career's in flux. He's in purgatory. Like, he can't do anything at this point. Like, he's incapable of playing. The odds of teams wanting him, like Marseille might take him now. That was the last rumored team.
Not on a permanent basis. That's even before this injury.
It's just there isn't a permanent solution to a player who seems permanently on the injury list. And it's just unfortunate because of how good he was when healthy, how much of a key figure he could have been within this club. Like, dude, Kessie walks for free because everybody likes to talk about that. Scudetto winning midfield. Kessie leaves for free. He's in Saudi. Tonali, also midfielder, sold for 70 million. Unfortunate. Replace him. Then you have Bennacer, the one guy that you didn't get rid of. Can't even play. So you're in this situation where he isn't a microcosm of everything that's been happening to the club the past 24 months. He's actually at the forefront of what's been wrong. And it's really frustrating because this was a phenomenal player and one of the best midfielders in Serie A. And now he's not even one of the best midfielders on Milan. And that's really sad. And it's a really unfortunate situation because now Milan have an asset that has greatly depreciated and they're lacking a midfielder. And now they're relying on other players to fill in positions that they are not comfortable in. And they have to move forward and hope they pick up points. It's just not a good situation. This is a disaster. It's horrible. And guess what? Now more midfielders have to pick up the minutes.
The future of Ismail Bennacer, goes without saying, is highly in doubt. And that's not even, talking on the Milan side. We're talking beyond that because we all know that Milan tried to offload him in the dying days of the market, couldn't work out a deal with a couple clubs.
Yeah,
and I think that if you're Milan and you've built this sort of project/reputation as being a club that buys young, develops, and sells for a profit, if you're going to be so quick to part with a player like Tonali, who gave you a lot of guarantees in the form of really good performances, the identity and a face, but also the availability, which we all know the past 24 months, as you mentioned, when it comes to all these injuries racking up, is so vital to any team, let alone Milan, doing what they set out to achieve. It makes it that much more difficult to stomach. And what I mean by that is if you're going to build a project and you're going to build a club vision off of buying players young, maybe a little bit cheaper, below market rate, developing them, and then selling them, you also have to be able to say to fans, hey, if this is the approach we're going to take, you also have to show that it has some semblance of working. And what I mean is knowing the opportunity to sell Ismail Bennacer, knowing he's had this extensive injury record the past couple years. Correct. Right? If you're going to be sitting here trying to sell me on this whole thing, well, we buy you, and then we sell them for more. It was too good of a fee to pass up for Tonali, and then you go and reinvest it. One, you better reinvest it the right way, but two, you better keep the same energy on the other side when it comes to understanding the moment to sell a player that is depreciating, because that is the truth of the matter. As much as we love Ismail Bennacer, and as much as we love what he provided in the Scudetto winning season in the first couple years, He is a shell of his former self. He can't even show what his former self is anymore because he is not available for selection. So this is another case, and Milan management is going to get absolutely burned if they aren't already on social media, because I haven't really checked about this very thing, because they pushed, and they pushed to get him out for a good fee at the end of the market. They couldn't do it. They had to try to reintegrate him. And then I read reports that they're looking to maybe sell him in January, and it was a loan formula. Good luck trying to entree that to a fan base, because now you're losing another player that you viewed as having some value on the sale side of the market. So when it rains, it pours for this club, because now the players that you would say are sellable, you can't even sell on a permanent basis. No club is going to give you favorable terms. They're going to say, this guy can't even stay healthy. Yep. We're not giving you any sort of obligation. We're not giving you any sort of permanent solution. It's going to be a loan with an option, and the option is going to be very low, or it's going to be tied to appearances or whatever. I mean, guys, he's 26 years old. We're not talking about a guy that has years and years under his belt and he's over the hill. To your point, you hate to say it, but man, he had to go last summer, not this past one, the one before.
Because you couldn't sell him.
If you were going to sell Tonali, and the writing was on the walls with Ismail Bennacer, I would have been like, you know what? Okay.
He had a torn ACL. I couldn't sell him.
Whatever. It had to happen.
I know, but like they literally couldn't. Unfortunately.
Whatever the case, it had to happen before this past summer. It had to happen before.
I mean, I think.
Let me just finish. You're revamping the entire team. You're selling a cornerstone player. You're getting 8-9 guys in. Why not sell another guy? That shows you he can't stay healthy. That would have been the mark of a good management that is backing their way of doing things and backing their model. If they would have said, you know what, we're selling Tonali, he's for 70 million. And you know what, we're going to sell Bennacer. The decision is because he can't stay healthy, and his value probably won't be as high as it is at any point that it is now. And now, look where Milan's at. They got a player that can't move with wages that are pretty high, 4 million, I think, right? Who's coming in with the offer?
4 mil.
Who's coming in with the offer? You're not getting a permanent solution. This is another player you can't move.
You're right. They just couldn't sell him last summer because of the injury.
Fair.
I think what your point is, and like to not like tell you what you were saying, but like make the decision early this summer.
Yeah.
That
make the difficult decision.
And it felt like it's really funny and annoying because they hold out for a certain number on a player like this with all the negatives that you just mentioned, but they're willing to just dump these other players that have some value, like asylum makers. All right, whatever, take a loan. Okay, so where are we taking this Bennacer situation? Like, what is the idea with this guy? Because there would have been someone that would have been interested prior at the start of this summer. Guy's healthy, came back. We saw him debut.
Someone would have taken a flyer on him, probably.
Someone absolutely would have. At their age, they could have been like, okay, Milan's like a way of doing things. And the unironic part is this: he gets hurt on international breaks, not even with the fucking club. So that's to adding insult to injury, because that is just the ultimate trump card in saying like, okay, you're actually injury prone. Because there was stuff last year with Pioli, like, hey, it was also his training methods, the amount that they played, and how they played over the course of time, and not rotating enough leads to those issues. Whereas this year to start, Milan relatively healthy outside of the 30-something-year-old player that arrived late, striker, that picked up a knock and was out for 2 weeks. Other than that, we're not actually sitting here and saying, wow, look, there's a litany of injuries. There actually isn't. All right? They're actually fine. Knock on wood for this. It's frustrating. It's someone that we hoped could have been not a club icon of the greats like a Pirlo Seedorf, but like, where is that level of like legend where you get a Scudetto, maybe a couple other trophies, and you're looked back upon in your Milan career as someone who is a phenomenal player, will be celebrated for years to come, but just isn't a true icon like
a Bonaventura with a title, kind of.
I think even better than that.
Better than
His
him,
pot-
but
his
like kind of in that
potential
ilk.
his potential was top 5 midfielder in the league for years to come.
Yeah.
And we're not even sure he's a top 5 midfielder on the team. It's unfortunate. We love Bennacer. We just
Yeah.
hate the situation that he's in, and something should have been done about it sooner. Again, that'll pretty much wrap up this podcast episode. I don't think there's really much left to talk about. Oh, maybe just a prediction versus Venezia, if you want to do that real quick.
I'm gonna go blind 2-1 Milan.
Blind
Ugly.
2-1.
Ugly, but 2-1.
4-2. No, 4-1 Milan victory. Plenty
Okay.
of chances created. They finished some of these because I think we see full 90 minutes from a Tammy and or Morata, or they divvy up the 9 minutes as the strikers. I think those two striker options are great. I think they'll have their
Yeah.
best finishers. And there will be creations for it. Yeah, not super confident though. Definitely going to concede. I'd be very surprised if they didn't. Hope we see a little bit more of what we saw in that first half against Lazio. Have that kind of balance there. Don't make stupid decisions and fouls. Try and control the game. Fullbacks, show the hell up and mark, please. Fundamentally, and there's been reports that Milan have been sitting deeper in training, and Fonseca's working on that stuff. Well, hopefully it comes with a result. We are hoping all that happens. We also hope that you subscribe and follow us on That Milan Pod on Twitter. You also follow us on Apple and Spotify at That Milan Pod. Also follow us on TikTok, That Milan Podcast. Follow us on Instagram as well, That Milan Podcast. Again, MLM Podcast is a great thing to look out. Kush just had a big video on Redbird, I believe. Just a coincidence that the both of us have projects like that. His is good. Go and check that out. He had that release. Old Hard Rossonero, Sempre Milan podcast, Milan Coast to Coast, Milan Weekly podcast. Probably drawing a blank on another podcast or two, but there's been so many great content creators that we try and shout out every single damn episode. So if we do miss you, apologies. It's legitimately not personal unless you're a couple of podcasts don't get along with. Yeah, other than that, thank you guys. Let us know your predictions for the match coming up. You guys always comment and give us so much engagement. We truly appreciate you. And again, yeah, be polite. Any other final words, Matt? Besides, I've had you.
No, just real quick closing, kind of a quick closing thought. Just so people don't, because I know how like words like to be contorted and misconstrued. Wish Ismail Bennacer all the best in his recovery. A player I love, I respect for everything he's done. His service to this club so far. So there's no ill will towards the player. It's just a frustrating situation for a guy that we all love, and we know the type of player he can be and the impact he can have when he's healthy. So I just wanted to kind of close that so people don't again think that I'm attacking the player. It's just frustration because it's not a pleasant time for him, and it's not a pleasant time to be a Milan fan and for this club. So that's it.
Yeah. Shouldn't need to be stated on how often I wear that Bennacer jersey in here. It's my favorite kit, actually. Yeah, speedy recovery. Hopefully rebound, and we'll talk about a story that seemed highly unlikely, and that's recovering and having a very healthy and fortuitous career. Again, yeah, appreciate all the support. Other than that, we're heading out a little bit earlier than usual. So thanks, guys. Bye.